completely changed, particularly in the digital world we live in today. This panel is going to be led by Mamta Varerkar, who is the digital director at Tonic International, a leading media agency in the region. Please welcome Mamta.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Natasha. Okay, so we're going to talk about modern brands in a consumer-empowered world. The panelists for today are Asad Rehman. Hi, Asad. Asad manages Unilever's media investments across MENA. He's also responsible for driving communication excellence and innovation, as well as digital across the region. Hi. Can we have his mic on, please? We also have Michel Malkoun. He's the COO at DMS, which is part of Shuairi Group, and one of the largest digital media representation in the Middle East. He has been with Shuairi Group for over a decade, and he's been in this role for 5 years. Can we have the mics on?
We're on mics also.
So I'll start with a little audience poll. Show of hands, how many people over here have reviewed a brand online? It can be a positive or negative feedback.
No.
Okay, a lot of you, as I suspected. So we are living in a consumer-empowered world, and the shift to digital and social is unbelievable. And like Gavin mentioned, overwhelming. So Asad, I'll start with you. What are brands doing on social and using multi-platform communication to communicate with these consumers?
So look, the whole thing about what digital has changed in the way we communicate with our consumers as brands, essentially two things. One, the consumers are able to feedback now. It's like being live on stage and instantly finding out how interesting you are. Apparently not very. And the second thing is you're able to, the fragmentation that has happened. You use a very interesting word called multi-platform. The fragmentation that has happened demands the brands to be more relevant. Now, if you look at how consumers are feeding back, to us, it goes back, a tad bit before we start the journey on digital. It goes back to how we're actually crafting brands in today's world. You have to be relevant, you have to be meaningful, and if as a brand you don't have a purpose, you don't stand a chance of surviving that fragmentation or that feedback loop from the consumers. So the first thing you need to do before you actually step into the world of digital and start that journey on how you're going to deal with those multi-platforms and how or multiple platforms, and how you're going to start to answer some of the reviews or engage with some of the reviews that are happening in social media, you have to have your meeting. So you have to have your beat ready, and you have to have the story ready, and unless you have that, you're not gonna be able to survive in this world at all.
Michel, do you have anything to add to it?
So the shift to digital has put a lot of pressure on every single traditional company that exists out there, be it a brand or a publisher or a government or anything that you think of. And that pressure comes from really empowering every single individual. So the voice of each and every individual is out there. Today, any one of us can have or share his opinion about any single topic that exists here. So that obviously requires a change of management in every single company. So that push-down approach that we've noticed before, or we've been practicing for so many decades, cannot exist in this world. And I think Gavin before us touched upon on that point. You need to be able to adapt to all these changes in order to be able to survive in the future. The company who cannot adapt to something like this will be out of business very soon. So with that in mind, I think we need to respect, or any company or brand need to respect its customer, its employees, its citizens, and you need to be able to always engage with them in an authentic way, in an always-on way. Not every single time you need to reach to them and basically try and sell them something, because that you will lose the respect of anybody very, very quickly.
Great. You mentioned engaging with consumers. A great way to do that is influencer outreach. So can we start by defining what an influencer is to begin with?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, you know, if you look at the influencers in today's world, what has really happened is a lot of these people who are content creators who have a passion to sort of go out and speak to the world are able to communicate directly with their audiences because there's certain platforms that give them that freedom. So they, in essence, what they've done is cut out the middleman. So, you know, YouTube does that, Instagram does that, Facebook to a certain extent used to do that, Twitter does that. And they're able to amass audiences that are akin to some of the big publishing houses or some of the big celebrities. So in my opinion, a simple definition of influencers is they're either a celebrity in the making or they're a publishing house in the making. You know, eventually, and if you look at how brands have been using them, it's essentially in one of the two ways. You know, you buy into an influence because it offers a certain amount of audiences. And if these influencers did not offer you a set of audiences, they will not be as relevant. And it's not really a new phenomenon. I mean, you know, if you look at the essential profession of PR, it relies on somebody else speaking on behalf of your brand. And that's what influencers do, essentially. I remember back in, I actually don't remember, I've read it somewhere, I wasn't there when that happened. Back in the early 1900s, there was a guy called Edward Bernays. He was a nephew of Sigmund Freud. And what he did was essentially gave birth to the profession of PR. And it's a really interesting anecdote. If you have 30 seconds, I'll say that. He was an Austrian. He moved to New York, and he started a business that nobody actually knew much about. And he used to go and ask businesses for interesting challenges. So Philip Morris, back in the day, and I'm talking daily 1908 to 1910, Philip Morris gave him an interesting challenge. They said, look, smoking amongst women is a taboo. And we want you to come up with a solution that would break that taboo. And he did something really interesting. He got 5 celebrities to light up what he called torches of freedom in the New York parade, leading the parade. And the impact of that was so phenomenal that today, smoking amongst women, with due respect to the subject of feminism, smoking amongst women to this day is considered a sign of social empowerment and you know, the fact that, you know, freedom. And that's the impact some of these influences and some of this work that you do rightly with the influence can have. It can last centuries, to be honest, when you do it right. And that's the power.
And in the case of Unilever, how have you used influencers for some of your brands?
I mean, in a lot of ways. So, you know, we've done a lot of campaigns. The notable one that comes to my mind is something called a Sunsilk Style Studio, which is essentially about reaching out to consumers with relevant tips on beauty and hair care and styling, but not as a brand, because, you know, as a brand you may not be the most authentic style maker. So using influencers to do that, so we've used you know, influencers like Tamar Al-Gabani to really help us create a platform that has actually become quite popular in the region.
Is this in the GCC?
It was in the GCC, yes.
Great. And Michel, what about startups, considering the event and the audience here? Would you recommend startups to use influencer outreach as a way to get in?
You know, that's, you know, there's no black and white answer to this. So depending on the startup, depending on how their, you know, what's their business model is, and they can use you know, an influencer in order just to as a shortcut in terms of marketing, because they're all work on a tight budget. But you have to be consistent if you use that. You have to be really consistent in order. One marketing stunt won't do it. You have to be consistent at it in order to get to the objective of what you're trying to do. But yeah, I mean, anybody can use an influencer, be it a startup or not.
Yeah, I guess it's considered a quick win tactic for entry to market.
Yeah.
And Michel, this is for you. How has the media landscape evolved in MENA to address these empowered consumers?
So we have, you know, like going back to my initial point is that digital has put pressure for all of us to change, and that change is coming in different ways. So today, and if you want to go back to post-digital, when Asad used to plan his media plan, he had probably 3 different files. One audio, the other one is TV, and the third one is print. And so things were much simpler in that sense. And then when digital started, he probably did the mistake that everybody else did. He added one more file, digital, thinking, you know, each one of them is probably a silo, and then I look at the schedule and I tick the boxes, and I go 5 o'clock, go back home. But little did you know that digital is actually an engine that changed everything and mutated every single channel that we have. So today, in terms of planning, TV is no longer TV. So you can watch your actual screen on your regular screen, but you can watch your movie on an iPad or on an iPhone. Same story. What is print? Print is someone who actually is writing a story, and that story could be read on your iPad today. So there's that mutation is putting a lot of pressure on people like Asad, and in that sense, on really identifying who's his target, how can they reach them, the analytics. So we've got pressure on the research, we've got pressure on publishers, we've got pressure everywhere in order to adapt and become and make sense out of all of this. So I think the evolution in media is basically very much encompassing all of this. So today we are, what we're able to do is that an independent publisher alone can't actually be able to compete in this world. So what we're able to do at DMS is very quickly aggregating a bunch of publishers all together, all 38 of them, in order to gain scale. And with scale, we're able to actually compete in a big game that you're seeing in social and everything else. So that's the first step that we did. So, and we focused and highlighted the fact that all of the publishers that we represent, they do produce premium content. So the production of content is amazing. And in today's world, with the lack of content that exists, the focus and attention is from brand is shifting to actually creating stories and making sense out of the story. The third thing that we did is basically investing heavily on our tech stack. So content and reach is not enough. What we did is we're able to build our programmatic power. Today we have probably the biggest programmatic marketplace in the region. We've built our data unit. So again, we have probably the biggest pool of data in the region, and we've created our DMS studio, which is everything to do with branded content. So what does that mean to a brand, basically? And then I'll give you an example, which is probably a little bit relevant to Unilever. So today, with the amount of audience and different touchpoints that we have, we can see, for example, the skincare segment or skin savvy segment that we have at DMS. 15% of those are actually male, and this is extremely important for a brand like Unilever to know that pre-planning more, because that affects quite a lot of stuff at his end. So we need to look at the creative. We need to look at the tone of message that is going, and we need to know how to serve these guys. Because at any point of time, today we can look at we can see when are these 50% male skin savvy guys are in market to purchase a cream. So imagine how important that information is to a brand like Unilever, where we can target them where it matters. So the message becomes more relevant. The metrics of any campaign will become that much more healthier, and everybody is happy. Now, on top of this, what we can do is also programmatically address those people. So today, when Asad goes home after work, if we agree that every time we see a surge in a conversation on skincare, we need to be able to address that. So programmatically, we can basically tune the machine to every time they see those people in market off hours, rather than going back to the process of saying, let me call the agency, let me see, let me have another burst of campaign. That happens automatically. So the media scene in general has changed, and the absolute power of the new media actually creates a lot of opportunities from brands like Unilever. The only gap that exists probably is that the brands need to understand the capabilities and the power that the new media has in order to basically make the best out of it.
So what you're saying is we use data to get insights about our consumers, when they're talking, where they're talking, what time they're engaging with the brand, and use that for targeted messaging. Exactly.
So, behavioral, interest, and demographics are it's a lethal combination. It's a lethal combination in order for you to understand what these audiences are doing, what are they telling you, and how are we able to actually target those.
So Asad, based on this shift, what should brands do to win on digital?
So look, I think it's, what Michel has just actually done. He's very savvily articulated so many things that digital is impacting, from media fragmentation to data and analytics to insights, to how brands can actually start to craft messages in a way that they didn't do in the past. So I think, when we use the word digital, one thing we have to realize that we're referring to so many things at the same time that it's almost very difficult to pinpoint what should brands be doing in the world of digital, because it's like, what do you mean by that? Should we be doing search? Should we be doing programmatic? Should we be on video content, etc., etc.? But if you look at, and I say the end game, digital is means to an end. At the end of the day, what the brands are trying to do is reach X number of consumers with a specific message X number of times so that we can influence their choice of purchase. That's what we do as brands. And how digital has shifted to fragmentation, insights, they are actually conduits to new ways of doing things for brands. Now, if I look at, if I could highlight a few capabilities the brands must develop in order for them to survive in today's world. One is obviously looking at data and insights that is coming in from digital channels more robustly, more in an interesting manner. Have a data bank where you're actually consolidating all that data. Some of that may or may not make sense to you. Some of that may or may not be instantly actionable for you to start doing your plans on the basis of. But unless you're actually playing with that data, the chances of you going as obsolete, not as a brand, but as a marketer, are very, very hard. Number two, we have to start to create what we call customized, close to customized messaging. We lived through an era of mass marketing. A company like Unilever was a product of industrial revolution. Our brands became famous because it was mass media. Now the biggest challenge we have is because we're now moving towards a mode of communication which is becoming almost one-to-one or personalized. Now how do we start to craft messages that actually address that nature of the digital channel that we're operating in? So I think creatively speaking, how you tell stories, what story do you tell to which consumer, are really some really very common questions that we should be looking at answering very, very quickly. So programmatic, one benefit of programmatic is not really just looking at data and deploying your message accordingly. One capability of programmatic is to also deploy dynamic creative. I can actually have 100,000 execution of the same message, and based on my audience insight, based on the location, based on weather, based on anything else, I can actually start to show different messages to different consumers, almost getting to a level of personalization. And I think the third thing is agility. You have to move on, learn, move on. And that's the cycle really. You can't stop. You can't stop and think too much. And in the world of digital, we're very fortunate that we have platforms like these where you're able to sit down and, sharpen your knives. And before you start to cut the trees, think a little. But really, if you look at, what we're doing today, will we be doing the same thing next year, this time? No, I doubt it. And that's why, and none of us know what will we be doing actually in a year from now. So the only way to do that is to continue to keep doing and learn and just move on. And I think that agility in how you build that up in your organizational frameworks and your brand frameworks is one of the most important things to do in today's day and age.
Great, thank you so much. We're almost out of time. So just in closing, it's most important now for brands to be relevant. There's so much noise out there, there's so much clutter out there. For your brand to stand out, it needs to talk to the right person at the right time with the right message. and it needs to be authentic. Especially when we look at using influencers, when it's a forced message, when it's a forced relationship between a brand and an influencer, consumers can tell. Consumers are savvy these days. So with that, we'll end this talk. Thank you so much, Asad and Michel.
Thank you.
Thank you.